this is the problem that we have when it comes to Palestinian terrorism and Iranian terrorism, is that how do we judge when terrorism is bad, right? How do we make that judgment? How do we know when, like, oh, things are bad? Things are bad in Israel when? So things are bad in Israel when buses are blowing up, right? So thank God most of the people on this call are so young that they don't remember the days. You weren't born during the days when buses were being blown up all the time. That's when it was like, oh my gosh, Israel's like it's crazy terrorism in Israel, right? So now buses aren't being blown up. You don't read about terrorism that often, right? When a terrorist attack does happen, it's in the headlines for like maybe an hour or two online, and then something else takes over from it, right? It's not, so we have this sort of impression that terrorism's not that bad, right? It's not that bad, and right, but it's not. That's not what's happening. There's just as many attempts. The Palestinians are attempting just as many terror attacks. On average, they attempt 3 terrorist attacks a day on average. Okay, now that means that some days there's none and some days there's 6, but every single day they attempt almost 3 attacks a day. That means that right now, as we're all sitting here, there are Palestinians planning the next attack. Now it happens to be that between the Palestinian security forces, the Israeli security forces, right, we've gotten very good at stopping them. The wall has gotten very good at stopping them, but it gives this false impression that, like, there's no terrorism going on. The same thing is true of Iran. Right? Well, look, no one really got hurt, so it seems like Iran is not retaliating against anything, right? That's what it seems like. So Qasem Soleimani was killed, right? That was the general, right, the head of the IRGC that America killed on a drone strike in Iraq, if you remember, in the summer, right? And then it seems like, does anybody remember what Iran did in retaliation? No, because it wasn't on the news. So what Iran did was they fired missiles at an American military base in Iraq. And 200 American soldiers suffered brain injuries, life-altering brain injuries from the reverberations of the explosions. Okay, America knew ahead of time where the attack was going to hit. They knew to get their soldiers into bunkers, but the attack was so strong that they all suffered brain injuries. Why does nobody know about that? Because for some reason the press didn't report on it that much. So we have like this sort of image that nothing's happening, that Iran isn't retaliating. Iran is scared, right? We get this false impression that Iran is so scared of starting a war that they don't do anything. We're able to hit them with impunity and nothing happens. But it's not true. That's the crazy thing. They're trying all the time. So if you look at the little news stories, the tiny ones that come out and you're paying attention to them, that says that, like, a bombing attack was supposed to happen in the Israeli embassy in Belgium, and it was stopped by Belgium, intelligence services. Got a tip from from the Mossad, right? That's how it happens. And you see this little line. So that's just a little line that the terror attack was stopped. But imagine if it was successful. Then what would it be? It would be a huge headline, right? And then we'd be like, oh, Iran's retaliating. Iran's retaliating just as much. They just fail at it, right? They're just unsuccessful. But they're trying just as hard every single time. We have sort of like, because of our what's it called? Because of our dependence on media as our source of information, right? And we don't expand it that much, then we lose out on a ton of information, right? I once sat down, there was a guy that used to work for APAC. He was amazing. So he had he would speak for APAC. This is like going back 5-10 years, and he would know everything. Everything. It was crazy how much this guy knew. Be like, oh, this Ahmad Muhammad, terrorist that lives in a cave in Lebanon, is planning this attack. And I'm like, so I go up to him and I'd be like, his name was Jonathan Harris. His name is still Jonathan Harris. So I said, honestly, how do you know this stuff? Like, where are you getting this from? Is APAC get CIA reports? He's like, no, everything's on Twitter. You just have to know who to follow on Twitter. He's like, there are people that specialize in following Islamic terrorists that live in caves and monitoring what they're putting out. You can't have access to that information, but there are people that do this for a living, that like think tanks and stuff. And he said, if you can follow those people, then you'll see what's really happening. So I started doing it. He showed me, right? He showed me like 500 Twitter accounts to follow. that are, a lot of them in are Arabic, and you have to like hit the translate button, but then you really find out what's going on. So you find out that there was like some attack in a cave outside of Lebanon, and you're like, holy cow, that was huge. That's massive news, but the media is not reporting on it because it's like, for whatever reason, they don't make money on this. It's not, it's not a good story, whatever the reason that they're not reporting on it. See, you can't fall for the idea that because you're not reading about it, it's not happening, right? Especially in today's I hate the term, but fake news, times where news outlets aren't putting out the news that everybody needs to know. They're putting out the news that their base and their clientele want to read, right? They're catering to it. So if you're this place called Newsmax, right? So then you're going to put out about how like every single ballot in Georgia was forged, right? So they find one forged ballot that becomes like the massive headline. Like election stolen. They found one old lady in Georgia who who wasn't allowed to vote. Right, that becomes the massive headline. So then you're like, holy cow, there's like widespread corruption. Then you turn on like MSNBC, and they're saying how there's no corruption whatsoever. Right, and you're like, wow, there's no corruption. That's amazing. We're like the only country that has no corruption in their elections. So you have to recognize where the news is getting skewed. Okay, everybody understand? So is Iran retaliating? Iran's trying to retaliate all the time, but they fail. They fail. Okay. Any other questions? Shlomo, you got nothing here? Okay. Kat, your hand up? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a really quick question. So I heard that there's a high chance that there's going to be a fourth election. I don't know if you already spoke about this, but it's kind of interesting, and I want to know kind of what your take on it, what's actually going on, if there's anything that we should know or any like that.
Right. It looks like there's going to be a fourth election. I'm hoping. It's funny because I'm friends with a few members of Knesset, like where and like one of the many jobs that I have is I book speakers for a certain town in America, and every Sunday they have like an Israel show, and so I asked this member of Knesset like 4 weeks ago if he would speak to this community in America. So he said like, oh, I can't because we're going to be going to elections then. So this was 4 weeks ago. So I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, why would he be going to elections? He's like, you'll see. 3 weeks from now, you'll see. And that's when I want him to speak. He goes, we're going to be talking about elections. And then I found out he was one of the drivers of the election. Okay. He's like one of the, I say, it wasn't just like, he wasn't like prophesizing or it wasn't analysis. It was like, he was one of the guys pushing that there should be elections because it'll help him out politically. It'll move him up the list in one of the parties. So I said to him, like it was like by text, but I wrote to him. I said, you're like a real jerk if we go to elections. I said each election costs Israel 400 million shekel. Okay, we've got people suffering in the economy now. Israel's doing okay, thank God. But like we're in the middle of Corona, and we've got like problems here. Like real problems. We don't need to constantly reelect the same exact people to the Knesset just so that we can keep having. So these people can solidify their power base. It's absurd, absolutely absurd that we keep having elections. But people can't get along, and it's completely like disjointed. People can't compromise, and Bibi Netanyahu is not going to step down, right? So that's not going to happen. He's 1,000 steps ahead of every single other person. Okay, there's no one. I don't think there's a world leader out there that's as politically astute as he is. No one plays the political game better than him. He's won 7 elections. Okay, 7 elections. He calls elections. The only reason why he's going to allow elections is because he knows he's going to win. Right? It means that he's played out the numbers. He's played out the game theory. He understands how it's going to work, and he knows it's only going to better him. If he thought that elections wouldn't help him, he wouldn't allow elections. This isn't a guy that makes mistakes. He doesn't make mistakes when it comes to politics. Okay, he's just playing with everybody. So he's much better at this than anyone else. Look at Benny Gantz. Benny Gantz thought he was going to be prime minister. He's like, oh, look at this. Look, I'm so popular. I got everybody to join with me. I got Yair Lapid to come in as my number 2. And I got all these people. Oh, it's going to be amazing. And then I got to make a deal with Bibi. I'm going to be prime minister. And like everyone's looking at him like, are you this stupid? How did you run the military for so long? And nobody thinks you're going to be prime minister. Everyone knows the last words we're going to ever hear in our lives are Prime Minister Benny Gantz. We're never going to hear those words, right? And the minute he gives into this deal, he goes from 22 seats like the most popular person after Bibi, he's running at 8 seats in polls now. 8 seats. You know, like he got creamed, and everybody looks at him like you're a wimp, you're a coward. You can't play in the same league as Bibi. And then everyone looks around and be like, who else do we have? We've got nobody else. And Bibi's like, let's go to elections. You want to go to elections? Let's go to elections. He's like, come on, bring it on. You know, send me your best. You know, because he knows that there's no one even close. So yeah, it looks like we're going to elections because that helps the people. And Benny Gantz looks at it and says, if we don't go to elections, then I'm a nobody. I'm never, right? My only chance, and it's a very small chance, but my only chance of ever having any success is going to elections again. And maybe I can pull this off again. I know I can't, but who knows? Maybe I can. But doing this, defense minister, there's I have no chance whatsoever. So everyone's going to elections, but it's not for the good of the country. It's for the good of themselves. No one's going to elections because they think it's for the good for themselves. I don't know if you could hear, but I'm somewhat frustrated by this. But there's no one in Israel that's like, whoa, you know what we should do? Elections. We should have elections. That's what we should do. We should gather in places together in small areas where we can cough on each other and make sure that the numbers of corona go up. And we should all do it on one day together, right? Israel doesn't have early voting like they have in America. So we should have one day where we give everybody off because we want to destroy the economy even more. So we want to close all businesses for a day and then have everybody gather in small schools. We do voting in schools, right? So like in Gan. So like a little nursery classroom is where most people vote. So let's get everybody together in a little nursery classroom where right now parents aren't allowed in the building. Okay, parents are not allowed to, when they bring their little kids in, they have to drop them off outside the building. But for election day, what we should do is we should gather every single person in those small buildings and have elections. And then when the government is strapped and doesn't have enough money to help people that need, because the economy is destroyed because of the government lockdowns, we should take any extra money we have and spend it on hosting an election because we don't know what's going to happen again, right? Like it's the most absurd thing in the world. But yes, we're going to have elections again. I think Shlomi's asking a question. I think the what broke? Yeah, so Kachol Lavan. So Shlomi asking a question. Is the Kachol Lavan party done? Yeah, they're done. They're completely done. Kachol Lavan was a small party to start with, and then a bunch of other parties got together with it because of all these tiny little anti-Bibi parties. The only thing they had in common was their anti-Bibi. Okay, they had no other political philosophies together. So they all got together, and they're going to be together against Bibi. So then, as soon as they realized Benny Gantz has no backbone, so then they said, okay, you know what? Let's split up and we'll do better. So Yair Lapid went his own way, right? Yair Lapid is higher in the polls now than Benny Gantz. And of course, the other thing everybody knows is that as soon as we go to elections, polls mean nothing. It's like so Naftali Bennett right now is convinced that he could pull out a victory against Bibi because for the last couple of months, he's been leading in the polls because he's like the only normal politician that talks about like an actual game plan of defeating corona. But the minute and people sit there and they're like, oh, do I really want Naftali Bennett as my as the prime minister? No, we don't want that. And then they're not going to vote for him. So it's ridiculous. It's what happens every single time. So I hope that answers your question.
It did. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody have anything else? Oh, so now it's my turn. Okay. So let's talk about an important factor here. We're about to have a transition. Remember, this thing is really like that we do here. This year is like a little chaval. It's like a little shvach. It's very weak. But it's really about political advocacy, right? We're supposed to be lobbying. We can't lobby, okay? Because you can't see anybody. You can't do anything. It's like ridiculous. So this year it's a little difficult for our club here, okay? So but imagine if I always picture this. Imagine if NCSY had a minion club, like go to minion. Go like so, and then what would they do this year? That's what's happening with us. We have no political advocacy. But we're about to have a transition of major proportions, right? If you believe like the rational people out there that say that Joe Biden is going to be the next president of the United States, which I think that in like a couple of days we're all going to see that that's true, right? So if Joe Biden's going to be the next president, so the U.S.-Israel relationship is going to fundamentally change in the presidency. It doesn't mean that's going to be bad. President Trump, I think, was the most supportive president for Israel that there ever was. Okay? I don't think there was a more supportive president, and that doesn't mean that I love President Trump. Doesn't mean that I think he should be president. It just means that when it comes, if you just define, let me define my terms here. If you define support for Israel as supporting the policies of the current Israeli government, there is no president. If you go and look down, just make a chart. Here are the Israeli government policies. Here are what presidents have done right before, right? You know how President Obama, this is a great thing. You know how President Obama at the end of his presidency, he did not veto a United Nations Security Council resolution against Israel. Everybody remembers this, right? And what they say is that President Obama is like the biggest anti-Semite, right? Because he didn't veto it. He should have vetoed it, right? And you talk about that's why President Obama is so bad. Okay, President Obama. Let me give you two facts here, okay? Because we deal with facts, not emotions. Okay, so it's okay to have emotions, every once in a while, but we deal with facts. Okay, so President, that was a joke. President Obama, evidently not a good one because you have no emotions towards him and didn't smile. But anyway, President Obama had the greatest UN record for Israel of any president before him. He voted with Israel at the UN 100% of the time. That's fact number one. There was one time where he did not vote. He abstained. Not that he voted against Israel, he abstained. Yeah, that's fact number one. Fact number two, every single president before President Obama, let's count them, George Bush II, okay, Bill Clinton, George Bush I, okay, George Bush the first, Ronald Reagan, okay, and Jimmy Carter, Gerald Ford, Richard Nixon, okay, every single one of these people voted against Israel numerous times in the United States on the same issue that President Obama abstained on. But what did people go out and do? They say, President Obama abstained. He's the biggest anti-Semite. If he's an anti-Semite, then George Bush is much worse than Obama is. But if you say that to a Republican, they're like, what are you talking about? Bush was so supportive of Israel. He voted against Israel numerous times in the United Nations on settlement issues. Okay, I see people are leaving now. They can't take that. Okay, so right, so that's but that right, so that's like that. That's a fact. That's an absolute fact. Okay, so now we're looking at a transition, and so if we look at President Trump's record, and we just define support of Israel as here's an Israel policy, here's what the president did, you will see with 100% that there was support for every single thing that Israel wanted. There was support for Israel, okay? Like 100%. So if you just look at that calculus, so then President Trump was the most supportive president, okay? Now, that doesn't mean that Joe Biden coming in is going to be horrible. Yeah, what's going to happen is right when Joe Biden becomes president, what you're going to see is he's going to redo aid to the Palestinians. He's going to reopen the PLO office in Washington, and he's going to reopen a consulate in Yerushalayim that services the Palestinians. And every single right-wing person will go ballistic. Their heads will explode, okay? It's right there. Your uncle Fertig is going to go beyond nuclear, okay? And they're going to say that this guy is a swastika Nazi wearing, anti-Israel. Might as well sign up with Iran and wants to destroy Israel. And it's the stupidest thing. These are all cosmetic things that don't matter. They don't matter. There's anybody, by the way, when you start hearing these things, okay, when you start hearing, Biden's anti-Israel, just ask one simple question. Every time he does something that everybody starts decrying as completely anti-Israel, just simply say, oh my God, I can't believe he did that. It's incredible. This is what I'm planning on doing. So, can you just practically, what's the difference now? Just ask that one question. Practically, how's Israel worse off now? I can't articulate it myself, but you are very passionate about this. You think that he's hard. Can you explain to me practically what's different now? Why Israel's worse off than under President Trump because of this move that President Biden just did? Do that and watch me. Okay, and they're not going to be able to come up with an answer because there's nothing that he's going to do except getting back into the Iran deal that's going to significantly alter things for Israel. Okay, now You have people today that are saying that the Democratic Party is so anti-Israel, that we can't even talk to them. We can't talk to. It's just can't talk to them. Can't talk to them. Okay, that is the worst policy that you could have towards Israel. You can't if you're an American, okay, if you're an American and you're working to strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship, okay, and you want to live in a fantasy world where if I just support one party, everything will be okay. Well, guess what happens when the other party takes control? It doesn't work out well for you. Okay, and this is AIPAC's whole mantra of bipartisanship. That bipartisanship is so important because if you don't have both parties' support for Israel, when the other party gets into power, it becomes bad for Israel. Okay, we have to have friends on both sides of the aisle. Okay, now even if some of our friends on the other side of the aisle say things that we find very distasteful, okay, right? Congressman Deutsch is a friend of mine, okay, and I think he's great and wonderful. But Congressman Deutsch is against where I live. He's an opponent of where I live, okay, and I think that's ridiculous, right? And I tell him, right, he won't visit me. He will not visit me, okay? He will not visit me. He won't visit me. He came out with a whole campaign this summer against Jews living where I live. Against where I live, he wants me to leave my house. Okay, now that should be grounds for hatred, right? But we need friends on both sides of the aisle, right? We need to have friends because I need America to give Israel military aid. I need Israel to have cover at the UN when somebody wants to put sanctions on Israel. We need to make sure that somebody's fighting Iran, right? So we've got to have a support on both sides of the aisle. So putting your head in the sand and saying we're only going to support one party is detrimental to the U.S.'s relationship. Incredibly detrimental. It helps nobody. Okay, right? Everybody understand? It is the worst short-sighted thinking that you could possibly have. Now, does that mean that you have to be a Democrat? No. You could be a staunch Republican. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But you need to be able to say, okay, you know what? I've got to support. There's somebody in Florida. She lives in Miami. There's two people, Neil and Laura Rose. Okay, they're supporters of our program and they're supporters of AIPAC. Okay, they are Republicans all the way. Republicans all the way. And they donate a tremendous amount to pro-Israel candidates that are Democrats because they're pro-Israel. Right? Now, they cannot stand their politics. They look at them as like, okay, the politics are horrible here, right? But when it comes to Israel, they're friends with Israel, so we need to make sure they're in Congress. Guess what happens if we don't support the Democrats that are pro-Israel in Congress? Guess who takes their seats, right? It's not hard to figure out, right? Who's going to replace these people, right? This doesn't take geniuses, you don't have to have a PhD in political science to figure this out, right? So we need to be smart. We need to be smart. We need to be logical. We need to understand that the most important thing is the strength of the U.S.-Israel relationship. Okay, more important than our personal politics and what we think should happen. Okay, so you could criticize Democrats. That's no problem. Democrats they're not supporting Israel sufficiently as much as I would like. Okay, that's fine. You could do that with Republicans and say I think Republicans are too supportive of Israel. It's creating a divide between progressives, and it's not smart. And the way that President Trump handled things was wrong. Okay, that's great. But you've got to say thank you to our friends, and you've got to support our friends to make sure that our friends are in office. Because if our friends are not in office, then we've got enemies in office. If we have enemies in office, there's a problem. There's a reason why 90% of Congress is pro-Israel, okay? There's a reason for that, right? There's a reason why President-elect Biden, who disagrees strongly with Israel on its settlement policies, is pro-Israel in every other area, right? Why is that? Because he has a long-standing relationship with supporters of Israel and recognizes the importance of that relationship between the United States and Israel. Okay, that doesn't happen accidentally, right? That's because we've worked with Vice President Biden for I don't know, 40 something, for more than 40 years, right? Vice President Biden he's met with every prime minister, I think, since Golda Meir, right? So and there's a reason why those prime ministers wanted to meet with him, right? There's a reason. They don't meet with every single senator, okay? So and they don't have nevuah. They don't have prophecy that they realize that this guy's going to be president. If there was anyone in the Senate that you could point to and say he's probably not going to be president, it's going to be Joe Biden, right? He ran 5 times unsuccessfully. Okay, so right, as he was running for He was running for president, I think, when I was in grade school. Okay. And he was not successful. So like, that's not a guy that you would look at and be like, maybe one day he's going to be president. No, because he was the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate, right? He had a lot of influence. Okay, a lot of influence. Then one day he became vice president. And guess what? In 4 weeks, contrary to what a lot of people believe, he's going to be president of the United States. Okay, that's going to happen, right? So that's the idea. Okay, that was what I wanted to talk about. Does anybody have any last questions?
Yeah, I got a question.
Shlomi's got here.
All right, Rabbi. So, see, hi everyone. Seeing the Georgia Senate races, this guy Raphael Warnock and a guy John Ossoff. Those are both pretty progressive individuals. I'm not gonna ask about them specifically, but should they win, that mark like a really interesting dynamic shift in the Democratic Party and the House of Government. Kamala Harris protested. Now, I know you say Kamala Harris opposed her, and I agree, but she also did protest the APEC 2019.
No, she didn't. No.
She didn't come in.
No, many people did because she was a candidate. No one came in. None of the candidates came.
None of the candidates came.
Right.
Would that go to show that that's like the first time happening?
No.
2016, Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton both came.
Right. So Bernie Sanders didn't come. Right. So Bernie Sanders never came. Let me address Shlomi's question here. Okay. Shlomi's worrying. Okay. So there's two. I'm going to divide your question into two parts. Georgia has rules that were designed by they had a contest in Georgia a couple of years ago, and they asked third graders how they should elect their senators, and they took the worst answer from the third grade and used that as the way that they elect their senators. So they have 16 different elections to have a senator, and that's why they're the only people still having elections. Okay, so in January they have elections. There's 4 people running for their 2 Senate seats, and it seems like it's the most ridiculous system. One of the races I'm not worried about because it's 2 pro-Israel people, Democrat, Republican, fine. The other race is a woman who's very interesting. She's a Republican, but she's pro-Israel. Okay, take all the other stuff that she's done and put that aside for the minute because this is only about Israel. Running against her name is Loeffler, Kelly Loeffler. Okay, the Democrat candidate is a man by the name of Reverend Raphael Warnock. Okay, this guy is the worst nightmare. Okay, he has a sermon. Okay, I made a video of this. I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. I made a video of this. It has 54,000 views. Just to give you an idea, my YouTube channel, in the 18 years before that I've had my YouTube channel, I've had 70,000 views. Okay, so this is almost equaling all my other 1,000 videos combined. Okay, has just this many views. Okay. And it's horrible what he said. He has a sermon in 2018 in John Lewis's church, which is like the most famous church in Georgia, where he says that Israeli soldiers shoot Palestinians like birds of prey. This guy's bad news. Now, come election time, all of a sudden, he comes out with an op-ed that's I'm supportive of Israel, I'm anti-BDS. I think that Israel should have aid unconditionally. And then all of his all his Jewish supporters are like, no, he's a good guy. He's our friend. Like this year, I've gotten to know him very well. So let me ask you this question. His whole life, he's been critical of Israel. He decides to run for office. All of a sudden, he's got all these new Jewish friends, and you're like, "Oh, forget about the rest of this stuff." He's never retracted anything he said. Never retracted. Never explained why he's thinking new. He's not saying, "I was educated. I learned stuff." It's not like everyone's like, "No, he didn't know. He was just parroting other lines." No, he went to Israel and visited and saw with his own eyes and came to the conclusion that Israeli soldiers shoot Palestinians like birds of prey. Okay, that's the phrase that he used. Okay. Slander the IDF like crazy. I tell people, I'm like, why do you think that this is okay? How do you ignore this? That's a big problem, that race. If this guy wins, we've got serious issues, serious problems. Okay, real serious problems. In terms of Kamala Harris, Kamala Harris is going to have zero role in the administration. Can somebody here tell me the last time you saw Kamala Harris in the news? What? Couple days, right? What?
I think election day. I don't know.
Right. She went shopping with her husband once in a thing, and she's out. Okay. People that don't recognize how administrations run, the vice president has zero power. Zero power. They only have as much influence as the president will allow them. Guess what? Kamala Harris ripped apart Joe Biden as a racist during the primary, okay? And Joe Biden had to swallow and accept her as his running mate because he knew that would help him win the election. Does not mean he likes her and wants her as an advisor. Kamala Harris will have zero influence in this administration. Zero, okay? Zero. And Joe Biden, God should grant him good health, right? She will have zero influence ever. She's not going to win after him, okay? She's going to have zero influence, and she's going to be doing just ridiculous type of events where she goes around. She's not going to be. Joe Biden's never talked about having her as an advisor, never talked about having her as the relationship that he had with Barack Obama, who used Joe Biden as an advisor, who valued Joe Biden's opinion. He's never talked about oh, I can't wait to have Kamala Harris as an advisor. Never talks like that, okay? So that's not going to happen. Okay. In terms of progressives aren't necessarily anti-Israel. We talked about this last time with Congressman Richie Torres, right? That doesn't mean that they're anti-Israel. Progressives, right? They tend to be more anti-Israel, but that's not because of their progressive values. The progressives, and at this point I'll end here, the progressives have been completely shut out of the Biden administration. They wanted to have a lot in the party platform. The Biden campaign completely said no to every single thing that they asked for in the platform, and they wanted a couple of key cabinet positions. Not only did they not get key cabinet positions, they didn't get any cabinet positions, zero. Okay, and the progressives are now bigger critics of the incoming Biden administration. Okay, then you ready for this? Then the Republicans. Okay, so my YouTube channel is under my name, Uri Pilachowski. And I'm the only Uri Pilachowski in the world, so it's very easy to find. Okay, I think it might be like Pillows 1, 2, 3. I don't know. You have to. It's not hard to find. If you do Uri Pilachowski YouTube, sure it'll come up. Okay, guys, that's the end of our class today.
Yeah,
see you guys next week.
Have fun at the party.
Thank you. I won't, but thank you.
Stay safe. Bye.
Shlomi.